Okay. Right. So Robin, I will. Okay. Good. That's what I was waiting on. Hold a second. Okay, so we are going to begin formally now. Welcome, ladies and 121 edition. That's 121 of our Zoom public meeting. We wish to sincerely thank all those who have contributed in whatever way to the success of this ongoing pan-Indo-Caribbean and pan-Indian diaspora global project. Our chairperson today / tonight is Shakira Mohammed, a teacher for the past 14 years. She has a BA in business management and a BA degree with a focus on special needs education. Shakira is now entering the field of holistic wellness. Shakira, welcome. Please take over from here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mahaber, for that warm and generous welcome. It's always my pleasure to chair this program with you all. Good night, good morning, and good evening. Namaste and assalamu alaikum to all of you, depending on the time zone in which you live, because as you all know, there are always people in this meeting from all over the world. This is the 121st edition of our Zoom public meeting, which means for 120 unbroken continuous weeks, we have been here every single Sunday. The past 2 years, 5 months, and 3 weeks, we have featured over 401 presenters from all parts of the world, speaking on 120 topics. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a weekly forum being hosted by the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center, which is a legally registered research and publishing company operating since 2010 in Trinidad and Tobago. In order to continue this weekly program and to make it bigger and better, we're asking for you to give us your suggestions and donations so you can contact Dr. Mahaber for any details. This Zoom public meeting next Sunday will feature live conversations with Indian elders in the diaspora. We are still looking for more Indian elders over 80 years old to interview live on the program next Sunday. So if you know of anyone who's over 80 years old or their children, you can contact their children or grandchildren to help us in this oral history initiative. We would appreciate that. Ladies and gentlemen, our moderator this evening or tonight is Shalama Mohammed. She's the co-director of the Zoom platform. She's a business teacher and researcher from Trinidad and Tobago. She obtained her master's degree in business psychology from Franklin University in the USA. She is a strong advocate for health and wellness practices based on traditional and alternative healing. Shalma, welcome, and please take over from here.
Thank you so much, Shakir. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Namaste, and a very, very warm welcome to all of you. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to say thank you very much for choosing to spend this part of your Sunday or your Monday morning with us. This public meeting will take the form of a panel discussion. And to avoid trolls invading our program, our IT manager, Ravin Ram Singh, has muted everyone and has given permission to the presenters only to share their screens. Presenters are advised not to admit anyone or unmute anyone or allow anyone to share their screens. Thank you. Our meeting today should not exceed 2 hours, and we're here to talk about Indians in agriculture in the diaspora. We have a number of questions that we want to have addressed today. For instance, how did migration from India from the 1840s change agricultural practices in the Indian diaspora during indentureship? What were the changes in farming among ex-indentured laborers and their descendants in the post-indenture period after the 1920s? How has the shift from rural to urban spaces and the acquisition of education impacted Indians' traditional involvement in agriculture? Are most of the farmers Indians in Mauritius, Trinidad, Guyana, and Suriname? Does ethnicity, gender, class, and education determined engagement in agriculture. How many Indians cultivate the land today? How many of them occupy agricultural lands? What use is now being made of agricultural lands which were once used to grow sugarcane and cocoa? Is agriculture being discriminated against because there's a predominance of Indians? Since ethnic data is not collected in agriculture in the Indian diaspora, answers to the following questions might be speculative. And we hope to get some of those answers from our presenters and from you, members of the audience. Before we bring on our speakers today, we would like to show about a short video, and this was submitted to us by Mani Pakiri from South Africa. Thank you so much, Mani. This particular video highlights Indian fisherfolk who started seine net fishing in South Africa. Ravin, can you please bring that up?
They left the cane fields of Natal in 1865 to fish. In Salisbury Island, inside Durban Harbour. They pioneered seine net fishing in Africa using oar-driven banana boats. By 1885, they owned 12 boats, 14 nets, and employed 150 people. They created the first Durban fishing industry. And was rewarded by being kicked off the island and banned from the harbour. By 1900, they were forced to fish off Addington Beach. By luck and technique, they found more fish here. Amazing spotters forecasted the size, type, and movement of shoal, and seine boats gave chase. An orchestra of spotters, sea boats, and shore crew hauled the shoal to shore. By 1940, they had over 150 boats and 1,000 workers. They gave Durban an appetite for shared curry, sardines, crab, etc. They built palatial wood and iron homes on the edge of the sea, where they lived and worked as a community. Regardless of race, age, or gender. They produced heroes like the Padavatan Sikh, who rescued 175 people from drowning when the mighty Mgeni River burst its banks. They produced sporting heroes too. They built their own schools and infrastructure. They had arrived at a place where dreams can rise. But apartheid, not the sea, eventually conquered them. They were moved further and further from their fishing grounds. They built their homes they couldn't live in, and forced to move to places no one should live in. Until in 1963, after a century of fishing, they were moved here, Chatsworth, 25 kilometers from the sea. A place where dreams can drown, if you let them, or forget them.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And one of the reasons why we highlight it is because very often fishing and fisher folk are left out of the conversation of agriculture. And so we thought it important to highlight this situation that occurred in South Africa, in which we see how unfair those people were treated. And unfortunately, we're not too sure that they would have ever recovered from that. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's hear what the other panelists have to share. And again, we will talk about South Africa. Our first speaker is the Honorable Naren Singh. He is the Chief Whip in Parliament and a member of the opposition Inkatha Freedom Party. He is also a provincial minister in KwaZulu-Natal, having held various portfolios, including that of agriculture. Welcome, sir. You can go ahead and present for 20 minutes.
Thank you very much indeed, and greetings to all of you, wherever you are and whichever part of the world. As you said, good evening, good night, good morning. For us, it's a lovely evening here in South Africa. Thank you to Dr. Mabir and the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center for inviting me to be one of the panelists this evening on a very important topic. I have been a panelist before when we were talking about the role of Indians in the political scenario in South Africa, and I quite enjoyed that. This evening, so I greet all the panelists and everybody that are participants, including those from South Africa. And I am in particular accompanied by Mr. Kuben Mudli, who's had a span of about 45 years in the agricultural sector, starting as an extension officer, and later on, when I was minister, appointed him as director in the post-apartheid South Africa. So Kuben, welcome to you and thank you for joining us. And I'm also accompanied by Mr. Justin Basade, who is my head of research in my office in Cape Town. So the topic, withdrawal, migration, or marginalization. Well, I must tell you, for the Indians who came to South Africa, and thank you for flighting that piece on fishermen. And the plight of subsistence fishermen still continues even today in South Africa. And I, as a member of the Portfolio Committee on Environment and Fisheries, am seized with trying to assist subsistence fishers with some of the issues they have. Did the Indians withdraw from agriculture? Did they migrate? Or were they marginalized? Yes, they were marginalized. I can give a categorical yes. And because of the apartheid system. You mentioned the apartheid system. It was discriminatory, and Indians were certainly non-whites, as they were called at that time, were all discriminated against by the apartheid government until 1994, when we had a democratic dispensation. But did they withdraw? No. The Indians, I think, who arrived from India when our grandfathers arrived, were a resilient lot of people. And that resilience, I think, is something that keeps us mobilized, keeps us active in our country of birth, which is South Africa. South Africa is my country of birth. My grandfather came from India, Gorakhpur in the UP, 1897, as a 23-year-old indentured laborer to work in South Africa on the sugar fields. And the rest is history. So without those indentured laborers that traveled across uncharted seas, thinking they were seeking honey and gold, only to come here and find that was not the case, we owe them everything that we are today. And, in our prayers and in whatever we do, in whatever religion, we thank our forefathers for being here and taking this step into South Africa. I've got a couple of slides, well, about 10 or 15 slides that I would run through very, very briefly, but I will start with a historical timeline. And Justin, if you can bring the slides up, please. Yeah, so from darkness to light, the 162-year historical and agricultural timeline of the indentured laborer in South Africa. If we can move on. Justin, can you take us to light? Yes. Well, the historical timeline has a number of very important incidences that affected the Indian community generally, but I think Dr. Mabir is aware that we're going to share this with all of you so you can read through this in your own time. but I will focus specifically on the agricultural aspects of this historical timeline. And to say that in 1859, the Natal Coolie Law made it possible for Indians to be introduced as indentured laborers in South Africa. And so through that law in 1860, the first lot of Indians who came here as indentured laborers came in South Africa on the 16th of November. And the two ships were the Truro and the Belvedere. In 1879, another ship departed from Madras and came to the port of Durban. In 1885, the first discriminatory legislation directed at Indians is passed on to the South African Republic in the Transvaal. This was the notice that I spoke about that paved the way for the British at that time to bring us, our grandfathers and everybody else as coolies to South Africa to work on the sugar fields. In 1888, there were regular legislation passed compelling free Indians to carry passes or face arrest. And this was a very sad part, that you had to carry a pass, our African brothers and sisters used to carry what's called a dom pass, like an identity document. Otherwise, you faced arrest anywhere in South Africa. So these are some of the pictures of the first shipload of indentured laborers to arrive in Durban. And look at that, not even something that we would get into nowadays on the quietest and the calmest of dams. Yet they came thousands of miles to come to Durban. And they came here as indentured laborers to work on the cane fields. And from there were a number of discriminatory legislation where Indians were not allowed to buy farms, not allowed to settle in certain provinces. But despite all of that, they made a significant contribution to the industry, particularly the sugar industry in Natal, because that's where they came to. Although later on, a number of Indians came as business persons and free citizens, and they moved to other parts of the province. So Justin, if we can just move from there. Now we've got, well, with that start, we've had, the women are quite involved in the agricultural sector, and we didn't put the lady on the right to show you that there's a lady in Western outfit, but she is a fitness instructor or instructress, but very involved in farming, and that's why we thought we should showcase her. The women that came here, the indentured women, used to work on the plantation as tea pickers, and they worked on the sugar fields as well. And there are horrific stories of them being harassed, molested, abused by the whites of the time, who used to, and many of them even had children, illegitimate children from these white sugar farmers that treated them very, very harshly. And, they lived in barracks, what we call barracks. But from there, we've emerged to see Tashni Manju here, a roadside farmer doing extremely well. Then in 1900, Indians used to strike and express unhappiness about the way they were being treated in South Africa, and particularly in Natal. And a number of them were deported in 1900, and that's a picture of those that were deported. Well, some of them. If you can move on, Justin. Yeah, so these are some of the treason trialists. They don't relate directly to agriculture, but these are some of the heroic women and men that fought against the apartheid regime at the time. Many of them were imprisoned. Some of them allegedly committed suicide, but we know the security branch, actually killed them and blamed and said they committed suicide. In fact, now in 2022, we have a case of one of the gentlemen who they said jumped off a building, but meanwhile he was thrown off the building. So these are some of the treason trialists, and can move on from there. To touch now on agriculture specifically, it was in 1975 where Indians first saw technicians being introduced into the communities. And in that picture, you will see the guy sitting in the center with the long hair. We all had long hair in those days. That's Kuben Mudli, who I said spent 45 years in the Department of Agriculture. He started there in 1975, and they were trained as agricultural extension technicians. And at that time, we couldn't go to universities or anything like that. There was job reservation, but the Indians were given some opportunities through what was called the South African Indian Council. And Indian agricultural extension technicians were now placed with Indian farmers in and around Natal in particular. Can move on, Justin. But might I also say in the slide that we saw on fishing, they mentioned Salisbury Island. On Salisbury Island was the first, what we call Indian college, the first Indian university. It was on an island, and I had the pleasure of being a student there in my first year in 1971. And in 1972, we moved on from there to an urban part of Durban. So this was the Department of Agriculture that got established. The extension officers worked under this particular banner, and those are the areas they worked in. Can move on, Justin. Now, these extension officers provided a very, very much needed service amongst our farmers. You know, they taught them ways of farming in terms of using particular pesticides, irrigation methods, etc. I remember Kuben, when I was very young myself, coming to my late father-in-law's farm. He had 600 acres, he's late now, and Kuben used to live in a tent overnight on the farms for up to a week to ensure that he provided support. So Kuben played a very pivotal role with his colleagues, and they used to talk to our farmers about pest and disease control, soil conservation, crop production, provided financial assistance, environmental awareness, and animal production. If we can move on. Yes. You'll see this in 1991, where we talk about how the Indians, those of Indian descent, ascended to being very, very big farmers. And here was an instance of the Boda Singh family, very, very well known on the north coast of KwaZulu-Natal. They had, I think, the largest tract of sugarcane farms in that particular area. They're not farming anymore because of particular challenges that we have with land claims and land invasion, etc. But here was the Boda Singhs in 1971 winning a conservation award. In the next slide, Justin, please. So extension services continued. And by that time, I was fortunate to have been appointed by the Inkatha Freedom Party, led by Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, early in 1997 as the first person of Indian descent to be a minister in a province of Natal, KwaZulu-Natal. KwaZulu-Natal is largely the home of Indians. So as a youngster at that time, I was appointed as the Minister of Agriculture, and I signed a joint venture with the South African Sugar Association and went around, supporting our technicians and supporting our management in ensuring that we delivered services to farmers. But by this time, it was not only to Indian farmers, it was to farmers in general in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, because remember, we are now a democratic dispensation, so we had to service all the farmers. So that's the work of the technicians there. You can move on, Justin. Yeah, so nowadays, let's fast forward to 2022. There's been a diversification from the early beginnings where farmers used to plant, whatever they required for household consumption. And then, they moved on to plant for themselves. I remember my dad also being a farmer, walking around with a basket, house to house, selling fruit and vegetable. And through that start, we are where we are, and eventually built himself, got into the transport industry and everything else. My late father-in-law was chairman of what was called the Natal Indian Agricultural Association. And I know at that time, I used to assist him because, I had to learn farming, married to a farmer's daughter. So I had to get to know farming. And they had many struggles where the white farmers used to prevent them from coming to the wholesale markets and selling their produce. The white farmers set up boards, potato board, onion board, cotton board, every board that you could think of, so that there could be restrictive regulations to prevent farmers from selling their products in particular areas. I remember my own father-in-law, Siusanka Ramphal, being arrested for crossing a river because you couldn't cross that river and go into the urban areas with bananas on your truck. And he was a banana farmer. And he got arrested and subsequently released. But those were some of the trials and tribulations that our farmers went through. Today, we've got the first winemaker of Indian origin, Thongton Pillai, very proud of him. We've got olive production. There's Kuben Mudli there assisting with olive production in the Cape. So I think we've come a long way as farmers from the 1860s. That just to show that from 1860 to 1994, there was an amalgamation of government, and we called it the Government of National Unity. I was very proud to have started off in 1994 as a senator. So that brings us to where we started, the trials, tribulations, sacrifices of indentured laborers that brought us to where we are today. We still continue to struggle, not particularly as Indian farmers, but farmers in general, with high costs of production, with land invasions, with labor problems, etc. But I think we as Indians of South Africans of Indian origin can feel very, very proud of where we are today and how we've assimilated ourselves into the community of South Africa. So if these are just some pictures with me when I was a Minister of Agriculture. It looks like my son now. That was me in the 90s with President Nelson Mandela, who I hosted at a function, His Majesty the King. And on the right-hand side is the current President, Cyril Ramaphosa, the Speaker of Parliament, and the Chief Justice. So I think I'll end there, but hats off and, our prayers and gratitude to our grandfathers who came to South Africa and did what they did for all of us. So thank you very much. I'll take any questions later on. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so very much, sir. That was a very, very informative presentation. And I want to thank you for sharing your personal story and those lovely personal pictures as well. Thank you. And I'm sure the audience will have some questions for you later on. So we'll take those questions at the end of all of the presentations. Thank you once again. Ladies and gentlemen, let's now hear from our second speaker, and this is Rain Ramnandanlal of Suriname. He is the General Manager of B4 Agri and Food Systems. He is an agribusiness knowledge service provider for innovation, research and development, training, agriculture, and technology. So welcome, sir. You have 20 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much, Salima. Warm greetings from Suriname to everyone all over the world. And thank you, Mr. Dr. Kumar, for this invitation to talk about this topic in this soon session. Thank you very much. I'll talk about the Indian involvement in agriculture in Suriname and from indentureship to the present. My name is Rafin Ajay Ramnandanlal. I have a background of the higher agriculture education in the Netherlands. Suriname is a former Dutch colony, so we tend to go to the Netherlands for study reasons. And I did the same as many more Surinamese. So I went to the Netherlands for study, and I did an environmental science study in engineering, and later on a Master of Science in Business Administration, specific for change management and strategic management. And I founded this company, B4 Concepts Management and Advisory, and these services I conducted in both countries, but now I'm fully Busy from Suriname. So let me tell you something more about the history. I think some people might know of it, but it's always good to look back and look where our ancestors came from. So let me put up the next slide. The story in Suriname is that after the abolition of the slavery with our African brothers and sisters, then the endangered servants came from India, and the first ship that came was the Lalarook in 1873. And this collaboration wasn't what the colonists thought it should be. So in years ahead, up till 1890, they stopped the shipments of endangered servants from India and started with the Japanese from Indonesia. And that, I think that tells us something about the spirit of the Indian people and our Indian ancestors. They're very known with their own opinions, and I think that was also something that happened in those days. And this this attitude, I think, is also an attitude that is nowadays still something we have to be proud of, that we come up for our rights wherever we are. Another name that was given to the contract laborers was Guillaume Matthias. Guillaume Matthias is someone with an agreement, if you translate it. Here in Suriname, in the Sarnami language, it's also known as a translation to people that go through difficulties. So that's another translation of Guillaume Matthias. It's good to know that we have as native tongue the Dutch language in Suriname. And this Dutch language makes a distinction between the Hindustanen and the Hindostanen. It's just one letter, the letter E difference, but that letter does make the distinction between the Dutch language says the Hindustanen is associated with Hinduism, and the Hindostanen is associated with the descendants from India, so our ancestors that came from India, no matter what religion they had, even Muslims, Christianity, or Hinduism. I even heard in stories that even Jain and Sikhism is also been in that group. So that's a little bit about that history. It's also good to tell you that that if you look at where our ancestors came from, it was 75%, as we know of today, modern day Indian states of Uttar Pradesh, and smaller numbers from Bihar, Haryana, Punjab, and Tamil Nadu. However, there were also a very small partition of those who came from even Afghanistan and Nepal. So that's not known to everybody, but there was very few people also in those shipments towards Suriname. Nowadays, the population in Suriname, you could say it's about 650,000 people in the whole of Suriname. So it is not a very big nation, Suriname, as goes for the population. But the soil we have is 5 times the Netherlands, and the Netherlands has something like 17, 18 million people, and we have here 650,000 people on a land that's 5 times the Netherlands. But on the other hand, we have like I think 150,000 citizens of Indo-Surinamese origin, so Indian origin. And the part of the population is like 30% of ethnic group of the whole population. So if you look at the agriculture, from the beginning, there was a lot of, as we call Hindustanis in the agriculture in Suriname, and that was from the plantations on. they got some land after their 5-year contract. So after the 5-year contract, they could have their own land and go grow their own plants and crops. And that's what happened. And from that time till now, still Hindustanis are very much in the agriculture, but there's also a decline, you could say. I will go into that in the next sheets. Now the economy is employing between 9 to 15% of the workforce in the agriculture. And I think the majority in this number is Hindustani still. There are also other ethnic groups in the agriculture, but I think the majority is still the Hindustanis. The exact numbers we don't have. I think Ms. Shalima also told about we don't have much data in the CARICOM, in the Caribbean, about these numbers, and that's true. Also in Suriname, we don't have much data about agriculture, ethnicity, and what's the status right now, but this is what we know. So if you look at what the main crops were, especially where also Hindustanis were into, then you have rice, of course. Rice was a very important crop, still is for the Hindustanis to be in. And apart from the rice, you have the bananas, you had the sugar cane, and in the plantation period of the colonists, you had also the coffee and the cotton and the cacao. But now still we have the rice sector, we have the banana sector, and the vegetables, sugar sector is almost gone. It diminished totally. And that's very sad to say, but that's the fact. And you have also the beef, the chicken, the shrimp. So the fishing sector is also a serious business in where also Hindustanis are active in. This presentation I sent to Dr. Kumar and can be distributed so everybody can read it for themselves. A major thing that happened was in 1945 when mechanization of the agriculture started in Suriname, and that was a major thing. You can see on the picture there, combine. So then we started rice with the combine. Even later on, rice was sown in and was sown in with planes. So planes combines, so the mechanization really started off. And I think it was also a must to do so because of the labor force. As we have a small population, this was a solution to do the agriculture in Suriname. And at the other hand, the sugarcane industry, as I said, was down. Our state oil was investing in doing some research, which went very well with sugarcane, but their focus was to produce ethanol, not specifically sugar, but the ethanol. And I will tell you more about the banana sector, because the banana sector, also the rice sector, but the banana sector had also a lot of connection with the Hindustani. So I will go into that a little bit deeper in the next slides. As you can see, fishing, I was very glad to see the video of the fishing in South Africa. Also in Suriname, the fishing industry is a major industry. And again, as you said, I really don't know the actual data about the contribution of Hindustanis in the fishing sector, but there is a major contribution of Hindustanis also in the fishing sector in Suriname. I go deeper in the banana sector because this is more like a case study how Hindustanis were active in the agriculture. There was this in the 70s. There was a company founded, the Surland company. In Kiri, there was 1,000 acres of hectares, and in Yarikaba was even 2,000 hectares, but 1,000 was for the rice and 1,000 for the banana. And in both locations, it was mainly Hindus who were in the factories, in the company, in the fields. And even up to date, still in the board members, there are much Hindustanis active. However, you in the timeline, you can see that Hindustanis worked also in other sectors, also other parts in agriculture, but also all other sectors apart from agriculture. So there have been a diversification of Hindustanis working in the agriculture sector. The production is was from 1970 to 2001, like 34 tons per hectare. That was the highest productivity back then. And later it even pumped up to 55 tons of banana per hectare. Even against that, we had to face the Moko disease in 2006. And that was also due to the good management that was back then to rise the production. Almost, I think, 70% of the people were Hindustanis also in management. Now we are facing a revival, you could say, because the privatization of the banana company was not so successful up till date. So now the current staff is working very hard to revive the sector, and at a steady but certain pace, we can see that there is a revival of the banana sector in Suriname because of the privatization didn't went how it should have went. So there's still a lot of work to do. But I have good contact with the people, and they're very positive about how things will move forward. I got the question about if crops and technology change over time. It has. I showed the picture of the combine and new irrigation methods, and in the middle you see myself in my company. I have an hydroponics company with B for Agro and Food Systems. We developed a new hydroponic system, and with that system we grow vegetables. And our company is a knowledge development company. We develop knowledge. We do knowledge transfer, and we teach people how to set up their own business in the hydroponics. And we do, if they want, we do the installments also. So we install mini farms for them, and they can go into production. So this sheet, I think, is one of the main sheets in my presentation because this is, I think, the real situation right now in Suriname. If you look at the agricultural sector and in relation to the Hindustanis, young people don't have much interest in agriculture. At one side, you see some entrepreneurs starting in agriculture, but at the other side, we have a history where our grandparents taught us to study and move out of the sector and move out of the mud. And I think this is a common thing that's about over the whole wide world the same. Be a lawyer, be a doctor, do something else, go out the agriculture, and so on and so forth. So, and also back in those days, I can understand them because for the small scale farmers, it wasn't very high profitable to be in the hardship you were. So it's not strange that our grandparents, great grandparents, our elders stimulated us to go out of the sector. If you look now, especially men are still running agricultural companies up till today. There are a few women as company leaders in Suriname, but most of them are men that are running the agriculture companies. On the other hand, if you look at the schools, if you look at the bachelor and the master level, then you see the different schools in Suriname that has an agricultural study or component. Young women especially choose to study agriculture. more than young boys. So you have more women in agriculture, studying agriculture, than the boys. But in the end of the day, after the study, they don't end up in the sector. They end up in different other sectors, in banking sector or other sectors. They don't work in the agriculture, and very few of them only. There's a low interest in the sector overall, and that low interest comes from a low trust in the sector because of conditions and preconditions the central government should give, and it's not been properly in place yet. They are working pretty hard on these subjects, but it is not there yet. So the association with, at one hand, the hard work in the field that people have, working in the agriculture is hard labor, in the sun, in the mud, and so on. And at the other, you have these conditions that are not in place. Also, if you look at the banking sector does not finance production over trade. They are more willing to finance trade than production. And that's not stimulating as well. If you go to the banks of Suriname, you will find interest from 19 to 23% on your loans. So that's pretty high, you could say. So import and trade is more appealing for the youth. So youth are more going into import and trade, and it's more lucrative and appealing. And that's the short term, getting the quick buck. And production and export are long-term investments, and the conditions are not that ideal. There are some revival with new innovative agriculture methods. I see at the other hand, I see a lot of people investing as entrepreneurs or agripreneurs with new techniques such as we do with hydroponics, and I'm very happy with that development. And we also work on that development. We conducted like 120 projects from 7 years ago when we started. In those 120 projects, we did a lot of projects in Suriname, all over Suriname, getting people trained and installing their farms so they can earn their own money within 3 months on vegetables. And the other side, in the CARICOM and in the broader world, you can see that there's more interest for these new techniques because we get a lot of requests around the world. The sector potential is huge because the demand for safe food is increasing during COVID and post-COVID. We see in the request for and demand for safe food and food security is very high. On one hand, and the other hand, you see self-sufficiency as inflation rises is a must to go and produce your own food. We conducted some projects, what we do in Suriname, we conducted on the islands in the CARICOM, like Aruba, St. Martin, and other countries. We also set up production and train people because the island economy is very much an import economy. So they really want to import a lot of things, and now we learn them, teach them how they can do on hydroponics their own food production on the islands. So diverse programs are set up in CARICOM and in not only in CARICOM but in Suriname as well, to enhance the sector conditions, like standardization, certification, transport, cold storage, cold logistics, tax incentives for the sector, research and development, and laboratory for phytosanitary checks. And labor is also a challenge because you need labor, and not everyone wants to work in the sector at one side, and at the other side we have a lot of people outside Suriname and outside the region that want to work in the sector, and then we have to import our labor to work on in the field and on the agro companies. So my last slide is a little bit about what we do. We developed a new hydroponic system. We call it a hybrid hydroponic system. Our system works without a pump, and without greenhouse. So for those people that knows hydroponics, knows this is a very robust innovation, because if you don't need pumps, you don't need electricity for your operations. And you don't need a greenhouse also, because we are still developing our knowledge further. And now we are doing these projects where in 3 months, we are setting up new farms all over the country. We produce clean, fresh, local health greens. That means we don't use those damaging pesticides. If we use some crop protection methods, then we use biologically, organically pesticides, you could say, but that's crop protection. So they are safe. And we also learn from our ancestors about that. There's one plant or tree everybody knows about. That's the neem tree. The neem tree has a lot of benefits, and we use a lot of neem also for our crop protection. If you look at soil farming and our hybrid hydroponic farming, we have, in comparison to soil farming, we have 60% savings on labor cost, because you don't have to do so much field work anymore. We have 80% less water usage than on the soil farming. We have 50% less investment in pest control, as I told you before. We have more effective and efficient use of fertilizer, because everything's go in the system and nothing gets lost. Same with water, same with fertilizer, so everything is more efficient. If you add up all these things, then you have a higher yield on your crops. And where we do the installments, you can modularly do the installments. If you have 1 mini farm, you can go to 10 mini farms. So you can easily scale up. So you pay for the knowledge, the training, and for the installments. And after that, you can do it yourself, because we do what we do is total knowledge transfer. The people get all the knowledge they need. After that, they don't need us. They can go scale up themselves. And we teach them also a marketing sales model according to a buyer-led approach. So when you ever put a seed in the nursery, the outcome is sold already on beforehand. So what we're doing actually is making it appealing again for those youth. As we say, we're making farming sexy again. We want to attract them back into the sector, and it works, because otherwise we wouldn't have done so many projects. It's an ergonomic way of agriculture. It's compact, and it is season independent. So you don't have to look at the wet seasons, the dry seasons, because you just go on producing. So this is a little bit about what we do as B4 Agro and Food Systems. You can go to the Facebook and put in the B4 Agro Food Systems, and you get all our projects. I want to point out this United News article. It's about the FAO declaring this decade as the decade of family farming. And I'm very, very happy with that, because for, I think, over 12 years now, we are precisely saying this, that family farming is the way to go. Because in the COVID period, you saw that when everything was down all over the world, the family farming was providing all the local food. Everyone in every country in the world. And that's why FAO is declaring it this decade of the decade of family farming. And you can go to the United Nations and FAO websites, and you can find this or Google it. Also, I want to point out something else. I think that's very important for CARICOM and Caribbean region. The World Tourism Day, that is on the 27th of September, coming week. And I really want to take the opportunity in this platform to call out that we must look at agro-tourism. Agro-tourism is a sector still in development, but very interesting to conduct, especially in the Caribbean and all over the world. So that I wanted to just point out and take the opportunity to point that out. Thank you very much, all of you. I want special thanks to my team that helped me put together this presentation. Mr. America Anrud that pointed me out to meet Dr. Kumar Mahabir. And Mr. Robin Suchit is our CEO of the banana sector industry and the company. And Mr. Nitesh, Mr. Robin Suchit is of the rice sector, of Paloma Rice Industries. And Mr. Nitesh Ramakan is the CEO of the banana sector industry in Suriname. So these people helped me to screen my presentation. They're very good friends of mine, and I thank them very much. Thank you very much, all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robin. That was a very, very informative presentation. And I have to say, hats off to you all in Suriname, because you have just about 150,000 Indians there, yet there's a contribution of, I know it's not just people of Indian heritage who's contributing to agriculture, but 9% is contributed to GDP. And while you pointed out that there is declining interest in agriculture, we face the same thing here in Trinidad. Yet you will see that only about 1% is 1% of the output of agriculture is what is contributed to our GDP. So you all are doing quite well, and especially with the addition of technology on your behalf. So thank you so much for that. Ladies and gentlemen, let's now bring on our third speaker, and this is Riyad Mohammed from Trinidad. Riyad is a livestock scientist, an entrepreneur, and the lead consultant of R&K Tropical Agriculture Production Limited. Riyad is also the co-owner of Exotic Pets Plus Veterinary Clinic and a host of other things. Unfortunately, he is not here with us live today, but he did send his presentation via recording. So I'll now ask our IT manager, Robin, to please bring up an edited version of Riyad's presentation. Robin?
So basically, what's agriculture? Agriculture is really an art and the science of cultivating the soil, growing crops, raising livestock. It includes the preparation of plant and animal products for people to use their distribution to markets. And this was the definition by National Geographic in 2020. All right, so the East Indians came to Trinidad and Tobago in 1845, 226 individuals. And the internship ended in 1917 in Trinidad and Tobago. So some careers in agriculture, in the agriculture sector, we have agricultural economists, horticulturists, agricultural engineers, hydrologists, logging engineers, animal nutritionists, marine scientists, aquaculturists, naturalists, biochemists, biometricians, plant pathologists, biosystems engineer, veterinarians, food process engineers, and even wildlife biologists. So there are a lot of careers in the agriculture sector. And these are some of the organizations that support our food production and nutrition security sector. The Caribbean Food and Nutrition Institute, the Caribbean Development Bank, the Caribbean Agricultural Research and Development Institute, also known as CARDI, the University of the West Indies, the University of Trinidad and Tobago, the Eastern Caribbean Institute of Agriculture and Forestry, the Ghana School of Agriculture. So all of these institutions and organizations give great support to our agri sector. So a brief introduction into Trinidad and Tobago agriculture. We in the agri sector here, agriculture only contributes to around 0.5 or less than 1% to Trinidad and Tobago's national gross domestic product, or GDP. And it really accounts for about 4% of employment, but it's very important for the diversification of our economy. Just to shed a bit of light on the food import bill for Trinidad and Tobago, it's around 5 billion TT dollars. That's for Trinidad and Tobago. And the regional food import bill is around 6 billion US dollars. right? So that's a huge food import bill for our country and the region. Some of the issues I would like to outline in the sector, and I want to make some recommendations, and please going forward. All right, so pretty larceny is definitely an issue in our sector. It's really the theft of agricultural produce, and the kind of recommendations we need is that we really want to have a renewed pretty larceny squad, patrols, and solar security systems, right? Really on board to help secure the food that we grow, including livestock. Land tenure and documentation, it's also a bit of a problem where we have slow release of the land tenure documents, and this really holds back the whole process of accessing finance, subsidies, and incentives on the Ministry of Agriculture and other financial institutions. We also have an increase and resilience in the pest and disease populations. For example, the giant African snail, the locust, the red palm mite. And what we need to do is to focus more on nature-positive food systems or eradication programs that are environmentally friendly. Sometimes in the rainy season, we experience poor drainage and flooding. So what we actually have to do is to clear these water paths and waterways, especially in the commercial farming areas in the dry season, so that we don't end up with flooding problems in the rainy season or the wet season. Right. Drought and access to water. Yes, this is a dry season issue. So this is where in the wetter parts of the year, usually ponds are dug in the dry parts of the year, but are filled in the wet parts of the year, so that the following dry season you could have access to water. Right. So all of these are small issues that we need to kind of refine and help our farmers produce safe and nutritious food. Also, not only for Trinidad and Tobago, we have a very high cost of agri-input supplies and a growing cost. Now, what we need is some help from the government and the policy makers. We need to have these agricultural inputs incentivized. And if possible, if we could have the Bureau of Standards to try to help us manage the input supply cost, as well as the sale of goods and services coming out of the agriculture sector. With regards to logistics and supply chain delays, we have seen this during the pandemic, where we had feed shortages, some commodities for the agricultural inputs such as fertilizers, sprays, baits, many of those, even seeds, many of those were seen shortages during the pandemic period, and even now we still have gaps of some of these input supplies. What we want to do is to have more centralized points for storage, so that our capacity is a bit more, to get a bit more firmer contracts and to focus a bit more on the utilization of local input supplies. What we are facing in the livestock sector in particular is a lack of premium genetic stock for livestock. For example, importing semen. It's a bit costly, it's a bit time consuming, so we would want a bit more investment done within the livestock sector in Trinidad and Tobago. For example, importing another batch of juvenile animals to start a rebreeding program, right? To share your genetic stock with all the farmers and reinforce the record keeping strategies. Feed shortages, yes, this has been a feed shortage actually is tied into the cost of feed as well. So this was also seen in the last 2 years. So what we want to do is to really secure more long-term contracts, but for ruminants in particular, what we want to do is to actually grow forages locally, right? Because these animals with a 4-compartment stomach have the ability to digest fiber, all right? And we really want to source our grains, which is the energy source in concentrate feeds, locally or regionally, right? So these are the strategies to help manage the feed shortages. With regards to artificial insemination and veterinary services, we want to equip our staff or the ministry staff with enough human resource, enough working vehicles, and enough equipment so that they could service all the livestock farms in the country, right? Even if they were called upon in the same day, right? That is the kind of capacity that we should have. With regards to livestock in general, we need reinstated the Livestock and Livestock Products Board, right? Which is really the statutory voice for livestock farmers. This group of professionals lobby for livestock markets and lobby for the food standards, for example, for meat, milk, egg, cheese, all of those things. We also need a marketing agency for livestock products. For example, for crop farmers, we have the DEFCO aiding with the marketing of produce and the sourcing of markets and contracts. But we have no agency for livestock or livestock products. So we are asking for the livestock and livestock products board to be reinstated. Also, if we keep speaking about the export potential of our country, I fully support that. But without proper infrastructure and the facilities to manage the volume of exported food, and we are really going nowhere. So we need the proper infrastructure in place to handle the volume of the flow of goods and services.
Great, thank you, Robin. I want to say thank you as well to Riyadh in absentia. What he provided us with does not really speak to the people in agriculture in Trinidad and Tobago, but it's an expository pre-recording. And he shows here the contribution of agriculture to our GDP in Trinidad and Tobago. And of course, the significant challenges that the sector faces. So now we want to move on to our fourth speaker, who is also from Trinidad and Tobago, who might be speaking to the actual people involved. And this is Ved Siriram. He's a former Citibank managing director and manager of a 60-acre farm, which is cultivated with 35 acres in trees and the remainder allocated to sugarcane production, which is used in a small sugarcane factory. Many of you all may know that our sugarcane industry and sugar processing was shut down in 2002, So that what Ved Siriram is doing with the sugarcane factory is quite unique. Robin, please bring his recording. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. From around the world, from the region, I'm Trinidad and Tobago. I wish to thank Dr. Kumar for inviting me to speak on this platform concerning Indians in agriculture in Trinidad from indentureship to present. The contents of my presentation would be a very brief introduction. I'm looking at the periods into indentureship from 1847 to 1917. Second period, a post-indentureship from 1918 to 2003. That is the closure of the sugarcane industry in Trinidad and Tobago. Period 3, 2003, post-closure of the sugar industry to the present time. I would look at the impediments to agriculture in Trinidad. I will look at global trends, look at the future of agriculture in Trinidad, and the future of Indians in agriculture in Trinidad. Those Indian hands, whether in British Guiana or Trinidad, have fed all of us. This is by one George Lamming. He's a West Indian author, which really summarized the contribution of Indians to the Caribbean, including, of course, Trinidad and Guyana. During period 1, indentureship, arrival of the first ship to bring Indians was in 1847. They were brought here to work on the lands to replace the slaves that were then freed. Indentureship was a harsh life, primarily working on the sugar estates owned by the whites, descendants of slave masters. They brought with them medicinal plants and vegetables peculiar to India, along with their culture and religious practices. The Indians became the backbone of the sugar industry, providing manual labor. However, their contributions during this period to all aspects of agriculture was restricted due to their contracts of indentureship. Period 2, post-indentureship, 1917 to 2003. This second period was a liberating period for Indians. The end of indentureship unleashed the entrepreneurial spirit, and many Indians became landowners and businessmen. Most, however, continued to work in the sugar estates. Some went to work in the cocoa, coffee, and coconut plantations. With the Second World War, the Americans built roads, air bases, and the demand for construction grew rapidly, the Indian landowners went into construction and related businesses. Indian parents sacrificed to educate their children, often at the highest levels, obtaining doctorate, and becoming medical doctors, lawyers, engineers, etc. The Indian families expanded their land holdings, and many had acquired large estates of over 100 acres. For example, my father in the 1950s bought over 300 acres in a village named Hindustan in South Trinidad. He was the first Indo-Trinidadian to own and operate a sugar mill. Earlier, my grandfather bought a few estates cultivated with sugarcane and cocoa. Many Indian families became estate owners and cultivated large tracts of land in sugarcane. With land owning came dairy farming, vegetable crops, fruit farms, rice farming, etc., which were very common at the time. The Indian farmers grew many crops apart from sugarcane. Cow herds give milk, butter, and cheese. The dung from the cows fertilized the fields. Intercropping among cane fields was common. The farmers were self-sufficient for food except for a few items. Citrus orchards were developed and complemented cocoa, coffee, and banana cultivation. The large sugar estates were consolidated by Tate & Lyle, a British company, and in 1975, the sugar mills and large estates aggregating 75,000 acres was acquired by the government from Tate & Lyle. Private cane farmers had approximately 75,000 acres under cultivation. Sugarcane farmers had the opportunity to supply sugarcane to the factories at a minimum price per ton. This provided a secured market and farmers were able to get by. The government ceased the cultivation of their 75,000 acres in 2003, putting thousands of Caroni 1975 workers on the breadline, with a promise to give them 2 acres as severance. All the plots have not yet been allocated to several Caroni workers, almost 20 years later. By 2007, the sugar mill ceased operation and a centuries-old industry came to an abrupt end. The closure of the sugar industry was traumatic for thousands of sugar workers and farmers. There was no constructive consultation regarding the future of thousands of families. They were left to fend for themselves. Fortunately, to some extent, the oil and gas industry provided opportunities. Without the steady income from cultivating and selling sugarcane to factories, farmers were discouraged from cultivating the land. Most farmers abandoned the land, and thousands of acres to this day remain uncultivated. Around the same time, opportunities in the construction and service industries became available, and many of the farmers and former sugar workers began work away from the agricultural sector. As a result, all the estates suffered from labor shortages. The younger generation lost interest in agriculture and generally was not willing to return to the land, even though the families may have substantial land holdings. Farmers began to sell lands for housing to supplement income. At its peak, the local farmers produced for export. Sugar, now all sugar is imported. Oranges, most juices are imported. Cocoa, now limited exports, but we are a net importer. At its peak, we produce 20% of our rice requirements. Now production is at its lowest, with production below 10% of our requirements. At its peak, we produce 11 million liters of milk, now reduced to just 1 million. Coconut industry has been decimated. Packaged coconut water is being imported from Thailand. Agriculture contributes less than 1% to GDP. Agriculture employs approximately 4% of labor force, or approximately 30,000 employees. Successive governments have neglected the industry. Current government has no specific plans despite the looming global food shortages. The overvalued TT dollar, as it is cheaper to import. No protection against imports, as other countries have done with a negative list. Pre-deal larceny and general lawlessness. All of these are major impediments to agriculture in Trinidad and Tobago. The sector pay is not attractive. Water shortages in dry season from January to May. Land tenure uncertainty for many farmers. Poor infrastructure in rural areas. Uncertain market conditions. Lack of agro-processing plants to absorb production. What are some of the global trends that we will be facing or are facing at the present time? Globalization is being reversed, where countries are looking to be more self-sufficient. Food, for example. Unusual weather conditions have negatively affected global food production. The war in Ukraine has disrupted the production of grain, and shipping blockage has affected the supply routes. Fertilizer prices have risen, affecting the cost of agricultural production. Supply chain disruption in global and the cost of shipping has increased significantly. Let's look at the future of agriculture in Trinidad. Trinidad has all the ingredients to have a vibrant agricultural sector. The global trends are compelling reasons to create a vibrant agriculture sector to ensure our own survival. A lot depends on government's willingness to address the impediments and focus on agriculture as a priority. There are many opportunities in agriculture by embracing new and appropriate technologies. Novo Farms, for example, owned and managed by a young Indian farmer, has embraced technologies. In a 120-foot container, he is able to produce high-quality lettuce in volumes that would require 1 acre of land. Novo Farms also established linkages with other farmers to produce packaged cooked food such as tomato choka, baigan choka, that is eggplant, etc., of export quality. Jaggery being produced in Trinidad is also of high quality and comes in solid, powdered, and liquid forms. This can form the basis of a larger industry. We can become self-sufficient in rice production. This will require about 10,000 acres of land and employ 5,000 persons. We can recommence the sugar industry to produce 80,000 tons for local consumption. This will require 20,000 acres of land and employ at least 5,000 employees. We can produce syrup from cassava for the production of beer. We can establish a pineapple processing plant to process locally grown pineapples. The waste from such a plant can be used to produce animal feed. We can grow sorghum to replace imported chicken feed. Many value-added projects are technically and financially viable with proper direction. What is the future of Indians in agriculture? The absence of a booming economy, job opportunities in the non-agriculture sector will be restricted. In the absence of government efforts to address the impediments in the agricultural sector, no jobs will be created. The exceptional investments by a very few individuals in the agricultural sector will not generate the quantum of job opportunities. All considered, I believe the following will ensue. Agriculture will continue to decline. The innovative investments will be few and far between and unable to create the desired jobs. Government will continue to ignore agriculture. Indians will have no alternative but to seek a better future elsewhere, away from agriculture. High migration, as in the 1980s due to economic depression and high crime rate, will again force Indians to leave the country and seek their fortunes elsewhere. Their destinations will be the traditional United States, Canada, and the UK. Guyana may also be included, given the low population per area and the oil boom now taking place. This is the end of my presentation. I'm sorry I would not be available to answer questions, as this is done on a recording. Thank you.
So I also want to thank Mr. Ved Suriram in absentia. And I want to point out, Mr. Naran Singh, I did observe you shaking your head when you realized the low volume of production in Trinidad and Tobago. It really is a cause for concern. Riven, I did see you as well shaking your hand. I see that you're very familiar with Novo Farms, so that's excellent. So Mr. Siruram painted quite a negative picture at the end, and I really hope that he is wrong. I hope some people embrace technology and agriculture, and hopefully we'll be able to at least provide for subsistence, if not for the export market. So to Mr. Ved Siruram, thank you very much for sharing all of that. At this point in time, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to bring on Dr. Tara Singh. He's a writer and a researcher living in New York, but he's originally Guyanese. He's been on our program many, many times and gives us good advice on the ICC. Dr. Singh is going to speak a little bit about Guyana's situation in terms of agriculture. Welcome, Dr. Singh.
Thank you. Namaste, good evening, assalamu alaikum. Kumar just asked me to do a 5 minutes quickly on agriculture in Guyana. First, as all of us know, Indian immigrants came to the Caribbean to work primarily in the sugar plantations. And subsequently in the 1880s, they first came in 1838 in Guyana. Having worked in the sugar plantations and they were relieved of the indentureship contracts, they start to move gradually into the country areas, the villages, etc. So by 1880, they were able to establish the rice industry in Guyana, followed by the cattle rearing and some other cash crops. That movement away from the sugar estate continued, but not at a rapid pace. Many of the Indians still remain in the sugar estate to work on the sugar plantations, but those who move out, they cultivate the cash crops. We know what the cash crops are, like bananas, etc., cassava, but they also plant coffee and cocoa as well. Well, cocoa was always there, that was planted by the Dutch. When they left, Indian farmers continue with that. I know in my village, in the West Demerara, there were still many cocoa plantations up to the 1950s, 60s. But then the price, it was not economical and people get rid of them. And they start to focus on cane farming. One of the biggest sugar estate in Ghana, Wales, 40% of the cane produced was by peasant cane farmers. So you can imagine when that factory was closed by the PNC government in 2015, all those farmers together with the workers left on the breadline. In addition, they closed 3 other sugar estates and 7,000 workers were laid off. They had to join the breadline. 2 of them felt so bad as head of the family, they committed suicide. Now 7,000 workers translate into 35,000 heads, which they have to feed. So it was a very difficult time in the sugar industry. Now, it's true that the sugar was losing money, but you cannot evaluate a strategic industry that has a history and a culture attached to it in terms of money, monetary terms. You got to look at the economic value. So although the government might have subsidized that industry for a long time, the value, they said every dollar spent can generate $10. So they create a whole set of subsidiary industries. But one thing I want people should understand, when sugar was doing well, the government collected over $100 billion in revenue, what you call the sugar tax levy, which was never plowed back into the sugar industry for modernization and diversification. That was one of the main reasons why sugar collapsed, apart from the other major reason when the European Union withdrew the preferential treatment, which caused sugar price to drop by 34%. That really signaled the decline in the sugar industry. Now, I mentioned about sugar because sugar and rice, historically, they had produced the highest amount of foreign exchange earnings for the country. Now they are not the highest. They're struggling. The highest foreign exchange, well, apart from soon it will be oil, but right now is gold and diamond. That is on top of the foreign exchange earners right now in Guyana. I think I want to talk about Guyana. We are not pessimistic about agricultural growth. We know young people are moving out, but still there are many young people in Guyana who are attached to agriculture. The government is incentivizing agriculture development now. And as you know, the president is leading an initiative throughout the Caribbean, saying that by 2025, food imports to the Caribbean must drop by at least 25%. Guyana has started to plant in large scale soybean, corn, and now they're experimenting with wheat in the Rupinini area that's adjacent to Brazil. The theory is that Brazil can grow wheat and Rupinini is adjacent to Brazil. Wheat should also be grown there. So they're out the experiment, and they're focusing also in value-added products, agriculture processing plants, plus they have 2 milk pasteurization plants that will set up, one in number 5 village, West Coast Borbisi, and the other East Bank in region 4. And they have imported some new breeds of sheep and cattle, which can increase productivity, etc. And recently the government showcased a group of students, young students, who are working on agriculture in the nursery, and they showcase the products that they produce. So they are encouraging young people, giving them incentive to go into agriculture. And right now, most of the people involved in agriculture, they don't get any incentive. The only incentive they get is subsidy on fertilizer and duty-free. Those big farmers getting duty-free equipment now back. The government restored that, but those were cut out by the previous government. So they are working very heavily on that. And I think my 5 minutes is over. But agriculture is in good shape. The biggest challenge to agriculture in Guyana is not labor, but the floods. Guyana is 10 feet below the sea level, the coastal belt, and we get regular floods, and that does a lot of damage to the crops. So what the government is doing, they built a big canal leading to the Atlantic, the Hope Canal, and they're going to do a similar one in West Coast Borbis, one in Quarantine, and one in the Cebu coast to avoid this flooding. But once they can control the flood, agriculture will be relatively safe. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Singh.
I can answer any questions if people have.
That's terrific. Thank you very much. We also have Mr. Ganga Das, who would have provided some information in the chat on this agricultural situation in Guyana. If you refer to the chart, you can see the land distribution, how much of it is dedicated to agricultural production, and the fact that Gaisuko is still in operation, and so on. Mr. Ganga Das, were you able to unmute? Do you have audio? If you could just try to say something, so maybe we can hear you.
No audio. He said no
audio. Okay. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, at this point in time, I really want to say thank you very much to our presenters. Thank you so much for sharing of your expertise, your knowledge, and for taking the time to be with us. We want to open the floor now to those of you who would like to ask your questions to Minister Naran Singh from South Africa and Mr. Raven Ramanandan Lal from Suriname. I just want to remind everyone, while you do raise your electronic hands, this meeting is being recorded live. It will be uploaded later on YouTube for posterity. And I want to just say hi to everyone who is on the live stream on YouTube at this point in time. please raise your electronic hand in the reactions button at the base of your computer screen, and then you'll be unmuted by Robin and allowed to ask your question. So let's take our first question from Dr. Roseanne Kanhai. Go ahead, please.
Oh, hello. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Shalima?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Okay. So I don't really have a question. I just want to just make a comment, which is, well, first of all, thanks very much to all the presenters. Thanks to the ICC for organizing this and for getting us excellent speakers. I appreciated everything that was said. I just want to add, however, that, well, when we talk about agriculture, in fact, we do talk about, you know, the kind of commercialized agriculture that these speakers have been talking about. And I wanted to add that there is a cultural link between Indians who have been historically in agriculture, commercial agriculture, and I guess I should say kitchen gardening, backyard gardening, right? The fact that the similar kind of orientation and attitude and skills is was also practiced at the home and still practiced in many homes. Sometimes more women than men were involved, right, in growing the food that we ate every day. And I think I think it's important for us to keep that in mind as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that and for reminding us, Dr. Kanhai. I think it's the same throughout wherever Indians would have settled. Let's now bring a question from Dr. David Subran. Go ahead, please.
Yes. Two speakers from Trinidad spoke about radial larceny. And I am wondering if we have any suggestions from this international group about dealing with this. It is a serious problem here in Trinidad and Tobago. I personally ventured into the production of couscous, a type of yam, in a holding that was based about 5 miles from my home. And everything was lost. People, same Indian people, coming there with trucks and so on and harvesting, and now I can't even find a plant. I believe that there is technology, sensors and so on, that could send signals to some sort of monitoring body, and we need to really set an example. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Subran. First, I'll ask Minister Naren Singh if he can address that question, and then I'll ask Riven, please. Minister Singh, would you like to address that? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. I think, you know, the theft of agricultural product in our country is there. But by and large, I think it's people who are desperate for food. Although the whole issue of land invasions, etc., is becoming a serious problem in South Africa. We've had many farmers, particularly of Indian origin, that have had to leave their farms because of illegal claims to the land. And although we've got a land claims commission and a procedure, you find that violence tends to surface, and some of the farmers just abandon the farm. So I think in addition to just larceny, you have this question of land tenure systems that need to be looked at. But at some stage, if we have another question, I would like Raveen to allow Mr. Kuben Mudley to respond, because he's got a lot of experience as well in that. And I don't know if you would like to respond now.
Okay, sure. Riven, would you mind if Mr. Moodley responds? Yeah? Okay, great. Mr. Moodley, go ahead and unmute, please. Can you unmute your mic?
Thank you, honorable members. It's great to have such an audience. Theft in South Africa is very predominant with livestock. And with the livestock, we went on the RFID microchipping for certain breeds and in certain border areas. That was quite a problem that we had, and I hear the use of technology. But although you can monitor the crop loss, the important thing is to build and break down any social barriers that you may have, and to get people that are involved in the area more to produce food for their sustenance. It was better with the areas that were affected quite a bit by the theft, where there was an integration community involvement with quite a few of the farmers. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing that. Riven, go ahead, please.
Yes, I think this is a very a spot on topic, because if I hear the situation in Trinidad and I hear what's going on in South Africa, this urge that I had, the vision, the drive that I had with my team to develop this new method in hydroponics was actually based on these challenges, the same challenges, how to cope with them. And we made a combination in family farming, in small scale farming, in self-sufficiency. Let people produce their own food. And if you have those small farms instead of those big, huge agricultural farms, then you have also more diversification. You have more safety. If I go back to my ancestors in the beginning, like my grandfather, my great-grandfather, they were in the rice sector in Suriname, in the west of Suriname, in the district Nikeri. And you know what safety was? Safety was that behind every household, there was a rice farm. And all the neighbors had their own rice farm. And because everybody had their own rice farm, nobody was stealing rice from one to another, because everybody had rice. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, we have to nourish that kind of knowledge, that when we have food available for everyone, when everybody in every township, in every village can produce their own food locally, fresh, healthy greens, then you create safety in food, but also safety in economic and in criminal area. So that's I think that is a method that also would be sufficient for Trinidad. So I would be very happy to give a presentation about what we do to the government of Trinidad, and maybe we can do something.
We will take you up on that, Ruben. Thank you very much. So yes, predial larceny is a serious concern, and land tenure is one of the reasons, I think, why so many people, as Minister Singh would have outlined, people who are absolutely hungry will steal food, but not in the quantities that we are seeing in Trinidad. People are stealing. You go the next morning, farmers are ready to harvest one day, they go the next morning, the entire field is cleared. That's not being eaten overnight. It's being sold. So we need to take serious measures here in Trinidad and Tobago. Let's now invite Charlene to pose her question. Charlene, go ahead, please. Try unmuting one more time.
Okay, thank you so much, Shalima. Again, thank you everyone for excellent presentations and enlightening presentations, I must say. If you don't mind, I will leave my video off today. Apologies for that. My question / comment is very specific to Trinidad and Tobago, and it takes off from where Vade Siriram left his own. And whilst historically, the Indo-Trinidadian face discrimination because of agriculture, to some extent, I believe we absorb that discrimination within our psyche. And that encouraged us, to move away from the land and work towards the professional careers. We now operate as lawyers, doctors, managers in big business. Interestingly, in a small island state like Trinidad and Tobago, which is much different from Guyana and South Africa, Belize, and the other territories, where the land size is great. Whilst we are working for those big businesses and big institutions, those corporations themselves were buying up the lands from the closure of Caroni. Caroni lands and other lands are being bought up in bulk and large sizes by those same big corporations we work for. And I do agree that the trend is back towards agriculture, self-sufficiency, being able to provide food. Have we lost the Indo-Trinidadian, then lost our opportunity to return to the land, given the prices that are of property right now, given the prices that are there, given that land ownership is now dominated by a few, and discrimination in some ways still exists? That worries me no end. And maybe that was what may drive what Ved spoke about as his concluding remarks. And that's a question I would like to pose to whoever is out there may be able to answer, or at least provide some response to it, because I am very concerned. Thank you so much, Alma.
So unfortunately, Shireen, neither of the Trinidadian speakers are here live with us, so we won't be able to pose that question. And I'm not too sure that anyone from South Africa or Suriname will be able to answer that specifically. No, neither of them are saying anything. Mr. Mootley, would you like to make a comment?
No, thank you.
Not really, no, because it's really a Trinidadian issue.
Yes, it is a very Trinidadian issue and very specific to us culturally and based on the size of our country in large part.
Yeah, so unfortunately, we don't have a response for you, but thank you for sharing that. It's certainly something to think about. Let's move on now to Varun. Varun, go ahead, please.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Naren. It was very nice to hear you talk about Manita's family farm in Amkumasi. I have great memories of that. I just want to add a few things about, we spoke about a ship coming from Madras. That ship contained mainly South Indians, specifically Tamil and Telugu. They were the foremost people who actually were the fishermen that you saw the video of. The Fishermen's Society of Durban was extremely great. And as you heard through apartheid, we were moved from place to place till that industry literally diminished. On a different note, in terms of loss, currently right now, on the coast, we have Natal, predominantly the Indians settle there. If I tell you that there's no fish in around Blue Lagoon, La Mercy area, you wouldn't believe it. If I tell you there's no birds feasting there, you wouldn't believe it. All because of the contamination of industries polluting the sea and the ocean with all the chemicals from the factories and the waste sewage and so forth. A disaster that's going on currently. So losses in respect to environmental issues is something that's not addressed, but we are having this tremendous loss currently in South Africa. I wish something could be done for that. Thank you so much.
Minister Singh, would you like to comment?
Yes, Viren, good to see you from across that. And I will convey your regards to Manita and her mom. I'm sure they are also listening in. Yes, environmental issues are a huge problem with pollution, industrialization, etc. But I think another problem we face in South Africa is foreign trawlers coming into our seas and trawling fish by the thousands of tons. And, the subsistence fishermen are exposed to regulation and laws that are so prohibitive for them to just put food on the table. And yet you have these trawlers coming in. And I don't think any country, including South Africa, has the capacity to deal with these poachers of fish. But Viren, you're quite right. Durban's become a major problem. But fortunately, we have a very active environmental lobby group here led by Mr. Desmond Desar. And I also sit on the environmental committee in National Parliament. And the whole issue of subsistence fishers, small-scale fishers, is something that seizes our attention all the time. But you're absolutely right. Pollution has really taken away that livelihood and protein from many of the fisherfolk.
Thank you for that, sir. I want to ask a question to Revan. You had said that the labor is currently imported to support the Surinamese agricultural sector. Where is that labor being imported from?
Yes, so the last, you could say decade, or decades even, we have a lot of Haitians coming in, people from Haiti, and we have also Cubans, people from Cuba coming in and working in the fields and in the factories, in food processing and agriculture and all kind of side business of agriculture. So that's the main thing we have had. We had also some Philippines coming in. The Philippines also working on land and other sectors. So this is actually what has been going on.
But I just want to clarify. Are those migrants, are they migrants who are coming into Suriname looking for opportunities, or is there an arrangement between the Surinamese government asking for labor?
Both are happening. So you have the migrants that come in, but you have also arrangements from gov to gov about the import of labor, especially focused on different sectors. Yeah.
Okay, all right, thanks very much. We had a question earlier in the chat from Vishnu. He wanted to find out what is being exported from Suriname and from South Africa, specifically to the Indo-Caribbean population in the US. Can you say that, Revan, first?
Yeah, from Suriname, there's still a lot of rice is going to Europe, the Netherlands, but also France and other parts of Europe. And bananas is also been exported. And apart from that, you have export of fish and export of vegetables. So vegetable export is also, but it's still, you could say, small scale in that sense. It can be much bigger than it is right now. Yeah.
Okay, I'm glad you raised the rice again. We are planning our ICC tour to come to Suriname next year.
Great.
And guess what? We want to come to Naikiri.
Great.
Specifically, so we're hoping to be there.
That's
we're
a place
hoping
to
be there for maybe a day overnight and into the next day. So for those of you all, great. So we're hoping to meet you there so we could see rice fields and everything.
For sure. I can give you a tour guide. No problem.
Wonderful. Thank you. So please, everyone, this is early notice that the ICC tour will be going to Suriname next year in August. And of course, we'll be giving you details of that. So for those of you in South Africa, keep that in mind. Everywhere else, keep that in mind as well. We hope you all will be joining us. We just want to take one more question or a comment from Dr. Sita Shah from Guyana. Sita, I saw that you put something in the chat, and of course, I'd like to invite you to please go ahead and unmute your mic and share it.
Okay, just give me a moment, please. Okay, I think I remember what I said. At the University of Guyana, we have more and more students joining programs in agriculture, both at the graduate levels and on the undergraduate levels. And another thing I mentioned is that in research in the rice industry is tremendous. New varieties of rice, new methods of production, new ways of addressing the problems in the rice industry. And we have had scientists who are based around the world working in sugar and in other areas, in other cropping areas. And this has been over decades of research, but recently there's an uptake on the amount of research that is being done in especially rice and other crops. That's it. And I want to thank Dr. Tara Singh for his comprehensive presentation.
Thank you so much. I know that President Mohammad Irfan Ali was very, very vocal about the fact that much of the largesse to come from oil and gas will be dedicated to the intensification of agricultural production, such that he really wants to make Guyana the food basket of the Caribbean. So I don't know how Raven feels about that. Maybe there can be some collaboration between Suriname and Guyana, as with several other things. And certainly we in Trinidad and Tobago will want to, well, I don't know from a governmental level what they would want to do, but I feel the people would want to partner up in that in some way. We all have to eat, and things are not looking too good for us in Trinidad and Tobago. So thank you for that contribution. I want to ask both Minister Naran Singh and Mr. Moodley now, what is being exported from South Africa, specifically to the Indian diaspora, wherever we are, in terms of agricultural produce? Can you all say?
Yeah, Kuben, can you come in on that one? But I would say one of our biggest exports is fruit. You know, we're very well known for our fruit. And Rian, you spoke about bananas, etc. But I think all the fruit that we have is something. And, you know, our wines, because wine is an agricultural product. South African wine is one of the best wines in the world. They compare with Australia and France and things like that. So I would think those two areas are, you know, we're very prominent in those areas. But Kuben, I don't know if you're still there.
Yes, I am. Thank you. Am I on?
Yes, Kuben, go ahead.
Okay, fine. Thanks for the question. Very interesting, but you got to understand South Africa is varied in climatic conditions throughout. So various parts of South Africa produce different items. So the Western Cape is predominantly the wine area where we are exporting our wines, grapes, dried fruit, deciduous fruit. But on the coast, on the East Coast, sugarcane and sugar is our major export. And if you're looking at farmers of Indian origin, we have the close on to 1,000 Indian sugarcane farmers producing about 1 million tons of sugar. And they form part of the South African Sugar Association that exports. But some of our major commercial farmers are now have diversified. I think climate change has come into effect. And they are growing ginger, turmeric, other spices, madumbis, which are yams, and exporting that to a lot of countries. And I can't say Indo-Caribbean, but they're going into the Asian countries of Taiwan, etc., where they are exporting. The other export that has come up now, and it's a fledgling industry, not everything about agriculture can be eaten. We looked at new industrial crops that are now coming on. And with diversification from our farmers who are highly entrepreneurial, cannabis and the production of hemp has taken off by quite a few farmers. And I think that's a topic for another day, where we look at industrial crops in the diaspora and where that is going. Currently, there's a 1,000-hectare research unit by Dr. Jamuluddin in Newcastle doing hemp. And we've had the first 10-story hemp building in Cape Town. So new crops, new diversification, new methodology is all in. I think we have a very bright future if we take climate change and mitigation risk factors into place in production. And renewed government policies. Mr. Singh, if you heard that. Thank you.
Yes, I'm sure Mr. Singh heard that. Yeah, thank you very much for sharing that. Same thing with cannabis production in Trinidad and Tobago, and I'm a little concerned that more lands have been allocated, both legally and illegally. So much land has been allocated toward the production of that maybe that's where our food production would have declined. Not saying that it's not a good thing. The problem is, while it is what's being produced, it's not really being converted into useful products for the entire population. And there is where we need to come together, perhaps, as a diaspora and see whether or not we can develop industry around that, driven by people in the Indian diaspora. So thank you all very much for your contributions today, and thank you to all our participants. Thank you to Dr. Tara Singh for adding in as well, and for Dr. Sita and Mr. Ganga Das for adding in their 2 cents about the Guyanese situation. Ladies and gentlemen, as is always, we at the ICC really appreciate the time and your effort in being here with us, and we look forward to seeing you next week, Sunday, for another program. I'll now turn you over to Shakira, who will close formally. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you, Shaloma, for being a wonderful moderator as always. And thank you all for taking the time to participate. Thank you especially to our presenters. As I've said before, this public meeting is being hosted by the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center. So if you have any books or reports that you wish to publish, feel free to contact ICC. Remember that we are asking kindly for any of your suggestions and donations, and you can contact Dr. Mahabir for further details. Thank you to the advisory team and planning team led by Dr. Kumar Mahabir. Thank you also to our IT manager behind the scenes, Ravi Ram Singh, who has been recording the program and will edit and upload it to our website and to YouTube permanently for posterity. Our topic next Sunday will be live conversations with Indian elders in the diaspora. Please like, share, and follow our Facebook page. I am Shakira Mohammed of Trinidad and Tobago saying goodbye. May God bless you all. Dhanyavad.
Thank you very much indeed for the opportunity. Thank you and good night and goodbye.
Thank you to all. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all for being here. It was wonderful, wonderful.